The Witch Herself by Phyllis Reynolds Naylor, Chapter 3. The girls had knelt on the kitchen floor of the Beasley home and looked at the cat. It was lying on its side in the cage, and its eyes were half open, vacant, staring. The saucer of cream had gone untouched. "It was perfectly all right when I took the cage out of the car," Mouse said. "And it was all right when I brought it in the kitchen. I went to the front window to watch Dad drive off and waited a few minutes to be sure he wouldn't come back for something. Then when I went to look in the car again, it was dead." "I don't believe it," Lynn said at last. "Why not?" Mouse whispered back, as though the cat or someone else perhaps could hear. "Dead's dead. I used to have gerbils, and a squirrel conked out on our porch once. I know a dead body when I see one." "I don't believe it because cats have 9 lives, Lynn said, remembering how she had tried to drown the cat last fall and had been so sure she'd succeeded. "More than 9 lives. I think it's pretending. The moment we take it out, it will spring to life and run back to Mrs. Tuggle. It's all a trick, part of her witchcraft, that's what." "So what do you plan to do? We can't keep it here forever. Daddy will be looking for the trap." Lynn thought about it. "Wait till 3 o'clock. If it's still in the same position, we'll take it out and bury it in a sack or something." "Mrs. Tuggle is going to be furious," said Mouse, leaning back on her heels, her eyes still on the cat. Lynn nodded. "She'll say we killed it. Do you think she'll do something to Mother to get even?" "Nothing she wasn't planning to do all along." "What if she tells Mother we took her cat?" "I don't think she will. She hasn't told our parents any of the things we've done or said or suspected before. It's between her and us, this battle, and she's out to win in her way. She's out to win it her way." Mouse put her arms on her knees and her chin on her arms and squinted her eyes the way she always did when she was thinking. "I've got another idea, Lynn. You said you told Mrs. Tuggle down at the creek that her cat was being held hostage, and she saw the cream in your hand. She didn't see the cat, but she knew he was around somewhere. You also said you told her not to be surprised if the cat told you something, right?" "Right," Lynn said uneasily. "Okay," said Mouse. "Then I think Mrs. Tuggle killed the cat herself." "What? Why?" "So he wouldn't talk." "But she didn't know where he was. You said yourself that the cat was okay when you brought it in the house. You think she was hiding in here or something?" "No, I think she did it by witchcraft, by her psychic ties to the demon cat. That's something else I learned from that book on spells and potions. Witches can cause things to happen from a distance by their relationships with other demons. Mrs. Tuggle could release the spring on the cage just by willing it from up there on the hill. But she could will the cat's death because she and the cat are closely Mrs. Tuggle couldn't release the spring on the cage just by willing it from up there on the hill, but she could will the cat's death because she and the cat are closely connected, and she must have figured that death was better than our having the cat as a prisoner. But Mouse, she needed that demon. She needs all the power she can get. Now she'll be absolutely desperate. She'll do anything." "Maybe, but I think she had it all figured out before she killed it, and she'll transfer it to something else. Don't be surprised if a dog shows up here tomorrow, or a rat or something." "Oh, no, Mouse, don't say it," Lynn gasped, terrified. But Marjorie didn't seem to find it so frightening. Now that she had figured it out, in fact, she seemed rather proud of herself. She stood up, hands on her hips, and stared down at the animal. "Let's bury it," she said again. "No," said Lynn. "At least wait till 3, just in case." They put the cage in the pantry and sat down at the kitchen table. Mouse got an orange and divided it between them. Lynn leaned back in her chair, sucking on one of the slices, and found she felt somewhat better herself because Mouse seemed so courageous. Marjorie was much more confident than she had been in the past. Always before, she had waited for Lynn to suggest something to do, listened to what Lynn had to say. Mouse was a girl who used to daydream in school, who wore socks that didn't match and shoes that didn't lace, and often wore an immense poncho week after week so she wouldn't have to bother with clothes underneath. It was Mouse that Mrs. Tuggle had set eyes on last fall, like an eagle after prey, and Mouse that Mrs. Tuggle's flock of crows had terrorized. But no more. Marjorie sat across from Lynn now, in a plaid skirt and jeans that fit, and with a decent pair of sneakers on her feet. Her hair was combed, and Lynn realized for the first time that there was something attractive about her face. Good grief, Mouse might even grow up to be beautiful. "You know what, Mouse?" Lynn said finally. "If Mrs. Tuggle has lived In this town for over 50 years, it seems to me there ought to be somebody somewhere who knows something more about her than we do. Lots of people have died, lots have moved. You won't find too many who have been here for 50 years. But there must be some. I'll bet if we went around from door to door talking to old people, we'd find out plenty. Do you know what our fathers would do if we went around asking questions like that? Mouse declared. They'd say we were stirring up trouble and harming an old woman's reputation, and they probably wouldn't let us see each other for a month. That was absolutely true. Lynn put her head in her hands and tried to think it through. They had learned from the book called Spells and Potions that a witch does not attain her full powers until she has murdered a younger brother or sister. That, they had decided, explained the sudden disappearance of Mrs. Tuggle's orphaned brother when he was 16. As a young bride, Mrs. Tuggle had brought him to America with her. He was 6 at the time, and for 10 years he had lived with the Tuggles at the top of the hill. And then he had suddenly disappeared. Mrs. Tuggle had told neighbors that her husband had found the lad floating face down in Cowden's Creek during the big flood. A few years later, Mr. Tuggle himself had died, and whatever secrets the white-haired lady had were now hers alone. But the girls had learned even more from the old book. If a witch managed to kill someone without any marks of violence on his body, preferably drowning, she could, at some later time, reincarnate him, bring him to life, for the purpose of adding him to her coven. The person would come back as an animal or as a person. Perhaps the demon spirit in the cat, if Mrs. Tuggle had removed it, would not come back as an animal at all now, but as the boy it had once inhabited. They would have to be very alert. The morning dragged on. Lynn and Mouse watched television for a while, made some cookies, vacuumed the upstairs, had lunch, anything to keep busy. At 2:30, Mouse could stand the suspense no longer. "Let's look at the cat now, Lynn," she said, and they opened the pantry door. The cage was right where they had left it, and the cat was in the same position. Now there was a definite look of stiffness about it, and the eyes had turned a whitish gray. "It's dead, all right," said Lynn. They got a burlap sack out of the tool shed. Mouse opened the cage and pulled the cat out. For a moment she paused, then quickly removed the chain with the spider medallion from around the animal's neck and handed it to Lynn. She wrapped the body in the sack, lapping the edges over, until it was a small, neat bundle. Then they tied it tightly with a rope and took it outside. They chose a place in the meadow and took turns driving Mr. Beasley's shovel down into the hard earth. They could not dig very deep, but at last they had a hole big enough for the cat. They dropped it in, covered it with dirt, and disguised the top with sticks and weeds. The shovel was cleaned off, but back in the shed, the deed was done. Lynn couldn't help but notice that the sky was much darker when they finished than it had been at the start of the afternoon. "Looks like snow again," said Mouse, and they went inside. It did not snow again, however. On Sunday, the wind took on a feel of March, blustery and strong, with a certain wild warmth to it suggested spring. But Mrs. Morley did not seem to notice that the cold spell had passed. On Monday, she went to work in Mrs. Tuggle's house as usual, silent and preoccupied, and came home the same way. Father and Judith decided to build a fire in the fireplace after dinner that evening, and Stevie was sent out in the yard to find kindling. The wind had been so strong that small sticks were strewn about all over, and Stevie came back with his arms full. "This will really start a good fire, won't it, Dad?" he said, dropping the bundle on the hearth. He turned to his mother, who was in an armchair. "Did you see all the sticks I got?" Mrs. Morley did not answer. She was staring at the rug. "Are you sick, Mommy?" Stevie asked. Mrs. Morley's eyes focused on the little boy in front of her. "Sick? You act like you're sick," Stevie insisted. "You hardly ever smile or anything anymore." "What do you mean anymore?" Mother said. "It sounds as if I haven't smiled for weeks." "You haven't, Mother," said Judith. "You've just been different, that's all." Lynn, who had been putting dishes away in the kitchen, edged over to the doorway to listen. She watched her father crumpling newspaper to put under the logs in the fireplace, and she could tell by the look on his face that he was concerned too. "You know, Sylvia, I'm having second thoughts about you going to Mrs. Tuggle's every day to write," he said. "Oh, good heavens," declared Mother. "Don't tell me that Lynn has influenced you, too, with her wild stories about the old lady." "I'm not talking about witchcraft," said Father. "I'm saying that shutting yourself up every day in Mrs. Tuggle's house seems to be having a bad effect on you. Perhaps you're being a little too solitary. If you don't associate with anyone but an old lady, it's bound to influence you." "Is it a crime to be Is it a crime for her to be old? Mrs. Morley snapped. Just because she's been around for a long time, I'm not supposed to associate with her, is that it? I didn't say that, Father said firmly. If you saw plenty of other people during the week and had a more active social life, it would be fine. But you limit yourself to Mrs. Tuggle and her memories and her way of looking at things, and you're bound to be influenced by them. So what do you want me to do? Join a club or something, sing in a choir, invite people over, anything to broaden your life a little bit. Lynn could hardly believe she'd heard correctly. At last, Father was beginning to see Mrs. Tuggle for what she was, but she knew better than to say a word about witches. Father hadn't arrived at the point quite yet. Well, I suppose I could socialize more after the book is done, Mother said. I've just started the final draft of the last chapter, though, and I want to stick to it till it's done. Socializing and entertaining now would ruin the effect. Father didn't answer. They all knew that Mother would do things her own way. The fire was lit, and Lynn walked in from the kitchen with a box of marshmallows and the long-handled forks. She and Judith and Stevie sat on the rug by the hearth and thrust white puffs into the flames till they caught fire, then blew them out. I could never understand why you kids call it toasting marshmallows, said Father, watching her across the room. Why don't you say burning marshmallows and be honest? That's when they're best, Judith told him. Absolutely black on the outside and hot and gooey inside. Want one, Mommy? Asked Stevie. Mrs. Morley held out her hand, and Stevie put one in it. But she didn't even eat it. Lynn wondered if she even saw it sitting there in the palm of her hand. Lynn, Mother said after a minute, Mrs. Tuggle's cat didn't come around all day, and she says it's been gone all weekend. You haven't seen it, have you? Lynn felt the color in her rise in her face. The cat? I haven't seen it at all today. What about yesterday? Yesterday had been Sunday. The cat had died Saturday morning. No, I didn't see it yesterday either, Lynn said. And her heart pounded for fear her mother would ask about Saturday as well. But Mrs. Morley did not. If you see it, let me know, she said. Mrs. Tuggle is terribly anxious to have it back. It occurred to Lynn suddenly that the chain the cat had been wearing was still in the pocket of her jeans, and her jeans had been thrown down the laundry chute. Mrs. Morley usually washed clothes in the middle of the week. Perhaps tomorrow. Later, when Mother was reading a story to Stevie, Lynn got up and went quickly down to the basement. She stopped on the stairs, one hand over her mouth, for the large heap of dirty clothes at the bottom of the chute was gone, and 3 baskets of neatly folded jeans and shirts and underwear were standing beside the dryer. The wash had already been done. She rushed over and dug through the pile till she found the faded blue jeans she had been wearing on Saturday. She thrust her fingers in one set of pockets and then the other. Empty. Wildly, she opened the washer and dryer, checking each one, then the bottom of the laundry basket, and finally the basement floor. The spider medallion was gone. Panic rose up in Lynn's chest. She sat down on the stairs, trying to calm herself. Why had they saved it anyway? Perhaps they had been afraid that Mrs. Tuggle would find it and use it somehow. If it had been buried with the cat, she must show no obvious emotion or concern when she asked her mother about it. Chances were that Mother had found it in her jeans and set it somewhere. She was always finding things in pockets on wash day. Lynn took a deep breath and went slowly back upstairs to the living room. She would pick up the comic section of the paper and pretend to read, and after a while she would say casually, By the way, Mother, did you happen to find the chain that Mouse gave me? It was in my jeans. Mouse did, after all, hand it to her back there in the Beasley kitchen. She walked into the living room and over to the magazine rack beside Mrs. Morley's chair to get the paper, and suddenly her eye fell on her mother's left hand. There, wrapped around her wrist, almost hidden by the cuff of her sweater, was the demon cat's chain. Terror overwhelmed her. Lynn stood beside her mother's chair and felt as though her knees would buckle under her, as though the trembling had begun with the soles of her feet. Mrs. Morley wore the evil chain as casually as if she had owned it all her life. Lynn swayed slightly and leaned against the wall for support. Always before, when she had thought of her mother, it had been someone warm and loving, someone who would understand and protect her from anything. But lately it seemed that perhaps Mother had become part of what Lynn feared the most. Was she one of them then? Was it already too late to save her from Mrs. Tuggle? Would she have to be saved instead from herself? Lynn went back to the hearth and crouched there beside Judith, watching the flames dance in the black interior of the fireplace. Why had Mother asked her if she'd seen Mrs. Tuggle's cat when she'd already guessed what had happened to it? She had obviously found the chain that afternoon. The heat from the fire slowly stopped Lynn's shivering. Stevie's happy laughter as he tumbled about on Mother's lap sounded all too normal. Perhaps it was all imagination. Perhaps Mother really didn't know that the chain belonged to the cat and had simply put it on so she would remember to ask Lynn about it. After all, Lynn had seen the cat sit on her mother's lap now and then and had watched her mother stroke its back. But she had never seen Mrs. Morley really play with the animal or explore its fur the way Stevie did. If Stevie saw the medallion, however, he would ask about it at once. He knew it had belonged to the cat, and if he did ask, Mother would realize, if she didn't already know, that Lynn had something to do with the cat's disappearance. She felt relieved, therefore, when she heard Mother instruct Stevie to go get his pajamas on. She would ask her mother about it after he went to bed. "Want another marshmallow, Lynn, before I put them away?" Judith asked. Lynn shook her head, and Judith took the sack and the sticky forks out to the kitchen. Stevie came downstairs again to kiss his parents goodnight. Then he disappeared also. Lynn was alone in the living room with her parents. "Mother," she said after a minute, her eyes still on the fire, not quite daring to look her mother in the face. "Mouse gave me a medallion on a chain, and I've lost it. Have you seen it?" Could her mother detect the shakiness in her voice, Lynn wondered. "Why, yes, I have," Mrs. Morley answered and held out her left wrist. "Is this it? I found it in the clothes dryer this afternoon." The medallion dangled in front of Lynn's eyes. "That's it," said Lynn. "I didn't know what had happened to it." Mrs. Morley unfastened the chain and examined the medallion in her hand. "It looked familiar to me somehow, and I just couldn't remember where I'd seen it," she said. "You've probably seen Mouse wearing it," Lynn said, taking it from her mother. "She has a lot of weird jewelry." "Maybe so. Well, I'm glad I found it then." It had been far easier than Lynn had imagined. Mother had willingly given it up. Lynn felt tremendously relieved. Tears came to her eyes as she realized that she had not been really truthful with her mother that evening. She longed to return to the loving relationship they had once enjoyed. If only she could tell her mother everything, hold nothing back, but that was impossible now. She snuffled once and gulped back the tears. Finally, as the fire began to die out, only the embers remained. Lynn got up from the warmth of the rug and prepared to go to bed herself. "I love you, Mom," she said as she leaned over to kiss her mother. "Love you too, dear," said Mrs. Morley. But as Lynn started up the stairs, she could see her mother still sitting in the same position she had been sitting in all evening, feet tucked beneath her, staring vacantly into the fireplace. The uneasiness returned like a large lump in the throat. She had hardly reached the landing when the phone rang and her father called her back down. It was Mouse. The voice at the other end of the line was breathless, excited. It was so soft it was difficult for Lynn to understand her. "Lynn," Mouse whispered, "are you alone?" "Well, no, not really." "Okay, then. I won't try to tell you everything." "What, Mouse? It's hard to hear you." "I can't talk very loud because I don't want Daddy to hear. Listen, Lynn, we've got to meet at the cemetery tomorrow after school. We've got to talk someplace where it's private, okay? What's up?" "I found something. I was helping out at the bookstore this evening, and I found something terribly important. It's the most important piece of paper you can imagine." Ye gods, Mouse, what is it? The Declaration of Independence?" "Practically," said Mouse. "Uh-oh, Dad's coming downstairs now. I can't say any more. Listen, Mouse, show it to me on the way to school tomorrow." "I can't. I'll be carrying it in my shoe to be sure it's safe." "The Declaration of Independence, and you've got it in your shoe?" "I have to. Lynn, if somebody knew I had it..." "Well, so long, Lynn. I'll see you tomorrow." Lynn went slowly upstairs, took a long bath on the second floor, and then went up to the huge bedroom on the third. What on earth could Mouse have found that Mr. Beasley didn't know about? Whatever, she'd have to wait till the next day to find out. She put the spider medallion in a corner of her top dresser drawer. She must never let Mrs. Tuggle see it, or Stevie or Judith either, because they would recognize it too and wonder how she got it. And yet, she felt a strange fascination for it. In her drawer, it became a magnet somehow, drawing her to it. She turned her back to her dresser and fell asleep. Several times during the night, however, she wanted to get out of bed and touch it, put it on and wear it, but she didn't. She was instinctively afraid. The medallion was evil, she was sure. And were she to wear it, well, she did not even want to think about it. But sometime in the night she had a terrible dream. She dreamed that people were calling her, only they were not saying Lynn. They were calling Dorola. She dreamed that she had risen from her bed and gone to the window, and in passing her dresser she had looked in a mirror and not seen her own face, but the face of the cat. She screamed. The next thing she knew, Judith was standing over her, shaking her, and the bed lamp was on. "Lynn," Judith was saying, "I think you've been having a bad dream." Lynn rolled over and hid her face in her pillow. "I guess I was," she said. "Thanks for waking me. Gosh, it was awful." "Monsters and stuff?" Judith asked sympathetically. "Worse." "Dorola." "What? Who's that?" "I don't know," said Lynn, "but whoever she is, she's awful." And that is the end of chapter 3.